Got it.
Hello, greetings to all. This is our BioBlitz presentation. We will be showing you some various organisms found on Penn State's campus that have a variety of different functions.
The first one we had found was our non-flowering plant, Bryum argenteum. Through some research on it, we found that it was very widespread in habitat. It can be found in cities and even in the deserts of Antarctica and Africa. It's a desiccation-tolerant species, which means it can survive with little to no moisture. It thrives in high anthropogenic activity, which means highly populated areas, because the way it typically spreads is by remnants of the plant sticking onto the bottom of people's shoes and other things and being transported that way. The moss obtains its energy through photosynthesis, and it absorbs nutrients directly through the surface of the plant itself. Our fungus is Ganoderma sessile. They grow mainly on hardwoods, and they have a kind of red lacquered top to them. They are typically not dangerous to the trees themselves, but they are facultative parasites, which means if they come in contact, or if their spores come in contact with a wound on the tree or another issue in the bark, it can have a parasitic effect. In Eastern Asia, it is used and believed to have medicinal properties for humans, such as lowering blood pressure and increasing blood flow. And it is identifiable by its typical lack of a stem. And it typically attacks and kills stressed trees, and is not quite an issue for healthy trees. Our vertebrate was an amur carp, which looks kind of like a koi fish, and in actuality, they are the wild version of the koi fish. It's the Cyprinius, and the amur carp is kind of special, and they call it the grass carp in the United States, as they feed on aquatic vegetation almost alone. They're from the Amur River in Siberia, and for humans, they are a pretty stable food source, and they can also be used as a natural aquatic plant control. And they can be used for that role without getting out of hand, because a sterile triploid carp can be produced with little effort and cannot be bred. And now Aidan.
For our flowering plant, we found bamboo. This was located at the Arboretum and identified with the iNaturalist app. It's the genus Stachys, however you pronounce that word, phylum Magnoliophyta. So the energy, it gets its energy through photosynthesis, through their leaves. They thrive in warm climates and will stop growing when it becomes cold. And they grow very large in warm conditions. And as you can see through the pictures, the leaves on this bamboo plant, this bamboo tree, they're very green, which means it's healthy and photosynthesis is occurring normally. There are two methods of reproduction for bamboo plants. Mainly it's through the rhizomes that spread underground, through like the roots of the plant. Rhizomes are stems and roots that are sent away from the plant underground, and new bamboo can grow from these rhizomes. And the other method of reproduction is through flowering and producing seeds, which is common in many plants. The life cycle of bamboo is about 40 to 80 years, typically, but it can live longer, even longer than 100 years. They will flower and produce fruit known as bamboo rice, which is edible, and it's mainly found in Asia. The importance of bamboo to humans is that they balance carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the atmosphere. They release about 35% more oxygen than most other trees. And bamboo is also, the wood of bamboo is very strong compared to other woods, and it's used very often for building. And one other thing is that the growth rate of bamboo trees is very fast compared to other plants, and it can be fully grown in about 5 to 10 years. The invertebrate we found, it was a honeybee, which is also found at the Arboretum. And I'm sure all of you have seen honeybees at some point in your life. They're pretty common. The genus is Apis, phylum Arthropoda, and the class Insecta, which was identified through iNaturalist. So honeybees will go about on different flowers collecting nectar, and nectar is a sweet liquid in the flower, and the honeybee is attracted to the nectar. They suck it up in their mouths until they can't hold anymore, and the capacity that of nectar that they can hold is almost as heavy as their bodies, which is kind of crazy to think about, that they can hold almost their whole body weight. And so once it's full, once they have their max amount of nectar, they take it back to their hive and they turn it into honey by reducing the moisture in it. And on the flowers, they also transfer pollen like through their legs, on their legs from flower to flower. This is how plants reproduce. Pollination from honeybees is very important to the reproduction of plants. And the importance to humans is that honeybees pollinate many crops that humans consume. They're responsible for about 1/3 of the food we consume. They contribute billions of dollars to the global economy. One of the environmental adaptations is the color of the honeybees. As you can see in these pictures, they are yellow and a black striped. And in the picture with the white and yellow flowers, you can kind of see it kind of blends in to avoid predators. Honeybees can also sting, as I'm sure you guys know. You might have even been stung before, but they really only do when they feel threatened. So you really don't have to worry about it. So our experience identifying organisms was a pretty good one. We didn't have too many problems. The flowering plants were pretty easy to identify, and there are so many flowering plants on the campus, so we didn't have any problems with that. We did have somewhat difficulties identifying the moths, and the honeybee was kind of difficult to photograph because it was, it's small and it's flying everywhere. So it was took a little bit of time to get a good picture of that. And the moths was just, kind of hard to identify, getting a good picture that would, work with iNaturalist to get the species. And some advice for other scientists. Be aware of your surroundings and your geographical location when identifying species. If you're in a warm area, a warm climate, don't expect to find something that thrives in a cold climate, or vice versa. So just be aware of where you are when identifying these organisms.
And then for the question and hypothesis that we had to come up with for our presentation, our question: does the presence of honeybees increase the pollination of plants more than the presence of other insects? And our hypothesis: the presence of honeybees will cause more pollination than the presence of other insects. So this is obviously a question pointed at whether or not honeybees, our invertebrate, have more of an impact on flowering and non-flowering plants than other insects do. So for testing the hypothesis, for the experiment, we would have plants in 2 separate controlled environments. The independent variable would be whether honeybees were inside the controlled environment or not. So we would have one with a general assortment of normal bugs, so butterflies and other regular flies. But the second controlled environment would also have honeybees and a honeybee hive on top of that. And the way we would interpret that data would be we would measure the number of plants in the area at the end of the test, at the end of the experiment, and we would compare to see if there was a difference between the number of living plants in each area, which would help distinguish whether honeybees have as much of an effect on the pollination of plants as we think.
So one of the experiments we found and researched was the pollination services in the UK of how important are honeybees to the pollination of plants. And as we know, honeybees are obviously important and pollinate many plants. But this study saw that honeybees may not be as important as we think they are compared to other insects. So insect pollinated plants are extremely important. There are many insects besides honeybees that pollinate. And this study saw that the insects are responsible for about 20% of the cropland in the United Kingdom. And pollination rate of honeybees has been decreasing since 1984. But however, the insect pollination rate overall has been increasing significantly. So this means that there are many other insects that probably play a larger role in pollination than honeybees do. And these are our citations. And that is our BioBlitz presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Aidan Jarrett.
I'm Luke Shingles.
And have a great day.